13. Collective consequentialism. It is worth distinguishing C from another form of consequentialism. As stated so far, C is individualistic and concerned with actual effects. According to C, each of us should try to do what would make the outcome best given what others will actually do. And each of us should try to have one of the best possible sets of motives whose effects would be best, given the actual sets of motives that will be had by others. Each of us should ask, is there some other set of motives that is both possible for me and is such that if I had this set, the outcome would be better? Our answers would depend on what we know or can predict about the sets of motives that will be had by others. What can I predict as I type these words in January 1983? I know that most of us will continue to have motives much like those that we have now. Most of us will love certain other people and will have the other strong desires on which most happiness depends. Since I know this, C may tell me to try to be a pure do-gooder. This may make the outcome better, even though if we were all pure do-gooders, this would make the outcome worse. If most people are not pure do-gooders, it may make the outcome better if a few people are. If most people remain as they are now, there will be much suffering, much inequality, and much of most of the other things that make outcomes bad. Much of this suffering I could fairly easily prevent, and I could in other ways do much to make the outcome better. It may therefore make the outcome better if I avoid close personal ties and cause my other strong desires to become comparatively weaker so that I can be a pure do-gooder. If I am lucky, it may not be bad for me to become like this. My life will be stripped of most of the sources of happiness. But one source of happiness is the belief that one is doing good. This belief may give me happiness, making my austere life not only morally good, but also a good life for me. I may be less lucky. It may be true that, though I could come close to being a pure do-gooder, this would not be a good life for me. And there are many other possible lives that would be much better for me. This could be true on most of the plausible theories about self-interest. The demands made on me by C may then seem unfair. Why should I be the one who strips his life of most of the sources of happiness? More exactly, why should I be among the few who, according to C, ought to try to do this? Would it not be fairer if we all did more to make outcomes better? This suggests a form of consequentialism that is both collective and concerned with ideal effects. On this theory, each of us should try to have one of the sets of desires and dispositions which is such that if everyone had one of these sets, this would make the outcome better than if everyone had other sets. This statement can be interpreted in several ways, and there are well-known difficulties in removing the ambiguities. Moreover, some versions of this theory are open to strong objections. They tell us to ignore what would in fact happen in ways that may be disastrous. But collective consequentialism, or CC, has much appeal. I shall suggest later how a more complicated theory might keep what is appealing in CC while avoiding the objections. CC does not differ from C only in its claims about our desires and dispositions. The two theories disagree about what we ought to do. Consider the question of how the rich should give to the poor. For most consequentialists, This question ignores national boundaries. Since I know that most other rich people will give very little, it would be hard for me to deny that it would be better if I gave away almost all my income. Even if I gave 9/10, some of my remaining tenth would do more good if spent by the very poor. Consequentialism thus tells me that I ought to give away almost all my income. Collective consequentialism is much less demanding. It does not tell me to give the amount that would in fact make the outcome best. It tells me to give the amount which is such that if we all gave this amount, the outcome would be best. More exactly, it tells me to give what would be demanded by the particular international income tax that would make the outcome best. This tax would be progressive, requiring larger proportions from those who are richer. But the demands made on each person would be much smaller than the demands made by C on any plausible prediction about the amounts that others will in fact give. It might be best if those as rich as me all gave only half their income, or only a quarter. It might be true that if we all gave more, this would so disrupt our own economies that in the future we would have much less to give. And it might be true that if we all gave more, our gift would be too large to be absorbed by the economies of the poorer countries. The difference that I have been discussing arises only within what is called the partial compliance theory. This is the part of a moral theory that covers cases where we know that some other people will not do what they ought to do. C might require that a few people give away almost all their money and try to make themselves pure do-gooders. But this would only be because most other people are not doing what C claims that they ought to do. They are not giving to the poor the amounts that they ought to give. In its partial compliance theory, C has been claimed to be excessively demanding. This is not the claim that C is unrealistically demanding. As I have said, I believe that this would be no objection. What is claimed is that, in its partial compliance theory, C makes unfair or unreasonable demands. This objection may not apply to C's full compliance theory. C would be much less demanding if we all had one of the possible sets of motives that, according to C, we ought to try to cause ourselves to have.